Hello everyone, I am Nick Perry at Schaeffer's Investment Research with your chart slideshow for Friday, May 4th. Today I am back with my weekly check of the broad market indices. In last week's chart slideshow I was talking about pullbacks and momentum, specifically that I had been looking for a pullback, but the market was showing momentum, and I sort of ended that by saying I would be keeping an eye on the short-term support if we did see a pullback. Comp had support. The RUD was pretty much trading right at that prior peak. But anyway, I ended the chart slideshow by saying that the overall patterns were constructive. I had been hinting, that I would seemed logical to me to see a pullback, but we weren't showing any signs of that. In fact, we were seeing signs of momentum. So that was sort of where I left things. That if we did see a pullback, I'd be looking at that short-term support, but momentum seemed to be carrying the action. When we turn to this week's charts, we do see a blip of a pullback. On some of these charts, you don't even really see a pullback, some more than others. But basically, the momentum continues. Let's start with the SPX. Basically, you see this little tiny pullback. That was at the beginning of the week. Basically, we saw a little bit of weakness early in the week, but that was quickly recouped, and we've still got a little more than 3 hours to go in today's trading. But you look at where the SPX is standing. It looks like we're going to end on a high note. When you look at the Dow, the pullback doesn't even really stand out. Basically all we had was this little blip of a consolidation in the midst of this straight uptrend here. Now, when you turn to the comp, we do see that the pullback, really stands out here. Basically, this is that short-term support that I was talking about. It comes off this peak here, and basically we did see a pullback. We kissed that support zone, and we got the immediate bounce right back off of it. And from a technical standpoint, that's a fairly encouraging sign. Basically, you do see, when you see weakness and you see support and you see the immediate bounce, that tends to be a fairly constructive pattern. And lastly, we have the rut, where basically here's that pullback, and the difference obviously here is that the rut has been struggling with this zone here. It's potential resistance right there, and the rut just hasn't been able to sort of muster the strength to pop above this. Basically, so we've got a consolidation right here. I wouldn't say that looks like a topping pattern, and I wouldn't say that I would even consider that a sign of weakness. Basically, it just hasn't pushed above it. We haven't seen a firm rejection here, and that's something worth pointing out. When you look at this, let me clear the chart off here. When you look at the action right here, you rally up into this zone, and then you get the swift pullback. In this case, we've rallied up into it, and now we've just got a consolidation. Blip lower, you just hold above the 50-day moving average and rally right back up into it. I view that more as a consolidation versus push into significant resistance. As far as overall takeaways, I think that basically looking at the trend, in this case the short-term trend is clearly higher. Call it momentum, call it a trend, whatever you want to call it. Basically, you look at this and you look at this, and that tells you that buyers are willing to step in, and they have not been hesitant at all. I've talked about maybe seeing a little bit of a pullback. That clearly hasn't happened, and if you think back to a few months ago, we were in a streak where pullbacks were almost non-existent. We had almost nothing until that late February pullback. So that's just something to think about in terms of while it may seem logical to see a pullback, there's nothing that says it has to happen, and waiting for it can cost you. Even in the comp, you're still seeing some momentum. The rut, slightly different, but if you look at just this trend, you still get that same trend in place. It struggled a little bit with this prior peak, but again, more consolidation. So my overall takeaway would simply be that buyers are willing to step in, and the trend appears to be up. Charts look constructive. So really nothing different than what we had been discussing, other than just the short-term trend seems to be growing in strength. So anyway, that's what I'll be watching next week, so stay tuned to the blog for further updates.